Welcome to Seaside Quilting Tutorials. My name is Terry, and today we're doing block 6 of our sampler blocks. This block is called Scrap Zigzag. It's a pretty basic block, even though it looks like it's not. We're going to be practicing our HSTs, half square triangles, and getting our seams matched up. So let's go ahead and get started. You need a light and a dark for this design. Now the other one I did white with a blue, so I went way light with that one and quite a bit darker. This one, not so much. So I have 2 that I cut of the light, 3/7/8 by 3/7/8. I actually cut these at 4 inches because I know some of you like to have a little leeway with your block to be able to square it up and make sure that you get your half square triangles going properly. So I went ahead and just went another 1/8 of an inch. I know also it's easier sometimes with the half square triangles. You can't do this with all blocks that you're making, but with the half square triangles, if you go a little bit more, it's not going to hurt anything because you can square them up after to the right size. So you can either do the 3/7/8 square if you're comfortable with half square triangles, or you can go with the 4 inches if that makes you more comfortable. And then you need a dark, you need 2 of the dark, 2 of the light, both 3 7/8 or 4 inches, whichever makes you feel better about those. And then you're going to do 4 of the dark, 3.5 inches square, and you're going to do 4 of the rectangles, 3.5 by 6.5. Okay, so our first step that we're going to do is we're going to make our half square triangle. So you're going to take your light piece and put it on top of your darker piece. Get those all lined up real nice. I hope I'm not yelling too much. We had a problem with my video yesterday with people not being able to hear me and some of my ones previously, so I'm trying to talk a little louder and project my voice a little bit better so you'll all be able to hear me, because there's no point in doing the video if you can't hear me. No fun to watch a video that you can't hear the person talking. So you're going to take your ruler, just making sure I get these lined out because this is a little off on this side. There we go. So you're going to take your ruler and you're going to go diagonally and you're going to mark it right down the center on that diagonal. Now once I've done that, I'm going to make a 1/4 of an inch mark on this side and on this side. Now many of you have already been practicing these, but for ones that haven't been, it's easier to make your marks so that you get a nice straight seam, which will have you coming out with a nice half square triangle. So you just line your ruler up with that center line and make your mark on the other side of it. Now this ruler is just a 1/4 of an inch square ruler. You can use any ruler. You don't have to have this one, although this one comes in pretty handy for me. I use it quite a bit. Okay. Excuse me. So I have my mark. I have my center mark, which will be my cut line after I've done my sewing. I'm just going to follow this line and do my seam there and my seam there, and then we'll come back and we'll cut it. I'm just going to move the camera. There we go. I got to switch out my foot. So I have my straight foot in here. And then I'm just going to follow those lines. I'm doing my stitches at 2.0. I like the smaller stitches. I feel like it gives me a stronger seam. So let's go ahead and sew this. We'll sew one side and then we'll sew the other side. I'm just going to line that line up with that center mark on my foot. And you want to keep your foot in the needle down position while you're sewing your seams. It's not quite lined up. Okay, now we'll do the other side. Okay, so our next step with an HST or half square triangle, you'll see it quite often in patterns written out as an HST. And I'm so used to saying HST, but they're just half square triangles. Make sure we get this in the camera. And make sure that you're being able to see everything. Okay, so I'm just going to line my ruler up on that diagonal where I made my line. I always double check before I cut. And then you go ahead and cut across it. Make sure you hold your ruler down tight so it doesn't slide while you're cutting and mess up your cut. And since I used a Frixion pen, when I put the iron on, it's going to take that mark right away. But you could use chalk, it doesn't matter. I like to set my seams before I unfold it. And then I just run my fingernail across. Now normally I would tell you that you're going to have this go to the dark side, which is what I should be doing, so I don't mess you up. So I'm going to flip this so that it goes to the dark side. I'm just going to run my fingernail across that seam, and I'm just going to fold that over, and I'm going to double check it and make sure that this fabric isn't rolled over onto this fabric, that I have it nice and opened up. And then I'm just going to press it. You don't want to iron back and forth. That'll stretch your fabric out and distort your block. And then I'm going to put my quilter's clapper on there just to set that seam. And the reason for the quilter's clapper is because this piece is hardwood. You don't have to slam it. If you had a more difficult, thicker bulkiness in a seam from having more pieces together, once you apply some heat, you can smack it a couple times and then leave it there and let it cool down. And you might have to do that a couple of times if it's a real thick seam to get it to lay flatter. It just makes it easier when you go to quilt it or stitch in the ditch or whatever, that it's going to sew more smoothly when you're doing it. And the purpose of the quilter's clapper is this hardwood, while I'm doing it, the wool itself helps to apply heat both from the bottom and the top more evenly. With the quilter's clapper, this hardwood absorbs the heat and helps to set the seam a lot flatter for you. So it comes in pretty handy. So once again, whoops, flipped it to the wrong side one more time. So I want to make sure that I'm flipping this and that my seam's going to go to the dark side rather than the lighter side. And especially if you have a very light other fabric, it's very important to have it go to the dark side so it doesn't show through up here. And I'm just double checking that to make sure it's not rolled over, so I'll be able to get a nice point. Put my iron on there to get the heat. And the clapper doesn't have to stay on there long. I just do a couple little pushes on it. Just let it sit for a couple seconds and cool down. And in the meantime, we can go ahead and we'll start putting this one together. You're going to clip your dog ears. These little points sticking out, they just get in the way. There's no need for them. So we're just going to clip them off nice and smooth. So we have a nice straight line there. Now you're going to take your 3.5 inch pieces and we're going to attach these, and you just want to look at your piece. We want the points are going to be pointing this way and our dark pieces are going to be down this way. So our lighter point is going to be going in that direction. And this is going to be on the bottom of it. And we're just going to fold that up, right side to right side. Make sure that they're nice and even on top of each other. Oh, I forgot to trim. Oh my goodness, what am I doing? What am I doing, people? Now you probably would have already told me, Terry, you forgot to stop. I did. We need to square these up because I did them at the 4 inches instead of the 3/7/8 for you, because I wanted to be able to show you the squaring up. Just gotta find my ruler. Now most square rulers have a diagonal line on them. Now I found out that not all of them do. I was under the impression that all do, not all do. So you want to make sure that you have a ruler that's square that has the diagonal line. And we're going to line that diagonal line right up with our center seam. And we want our piece to measure 3.5 inches. This doesn't want to slide because it's one of those no-slip rulers. So I kind of have to lift it up a little bit and adjust it so that I have each side is going to be on that 3.5 inch mark. And I want my point to be right there in that corner between the 3.5. So I want to make sure my corner is right there. And I want to make sure that this side is all lined up with the 3.5. And I want to make sure that this is lined up with the 3.5. And sometimes you have to adjust a little bit here and there. And I want to make sure that when I get done, that my diagonal line is staying right on that seam. That's very important. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I know I'm a little fussy about it. And then we're going to trim our edge on this side and trim our edge on that side. Now you want to hold your ruler down nice and tight while you're trimming so that you don't push, in case you don't have one that's non-slip. And even one that is non-slip, sometimes if you don't hold it down nice and tight, it'll slip on you. So you just want to hold it down nice and tight and make sure that it doesn't move on you while you're doing your trimming. I tend to be a little heavy-handed when I trim, so I have to pay extra attention that I'm not moving my ruler. And you're not taking very much off, just a little sliver. Excuse me, my allergies are getting to me already. Okay, so we have one made. We're going to trim our dog ears off our other one. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to line up our diagonal line on our ruler with the diagonal seam. And you're going to make sure that both sides line up with that 3.5 inch mark. I'm trying to get my fingers so I can get a hold of the ruler and move it. That can be the tricky part. Okay, I just have one little side there, and that shifted everything. Now, if you don't feel that you're getting it totally lined up, that's okay. I'll show you something in a second. So we'll go ahead and we'll do our trim here. And on the other side. And if you can see that a piece is sticking over on that side, which I do, I'm just going to turn my block all the way around, and I'm going to line it up from this side. Once again, I'll just put my diagonal on that diagonal seam. That makes sure that I'm staying nice and square. And then I'm going to square up my sides onto that 3.5. So it's on the 3.5 here, it's on the 3.5 here. This is on my diagonal line, very nice. And I do have just a little sliver on this side that is off. Not very much, but it's enough to make a difference. And I'm checking my other side. There's just a little sliver on that side as well. There. Now we got that all trimmed up. Now we can go to our 3.5 inch piece. I'll move you over here where you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so once again, we're just going to check our piece. We want our point to be pointing up this way, and this piece is going to be on the bottom of it. Your dark piece will be on the bottom. So your light piece, your point is heading sort of like is towards the center, so to speak. And then our 3.5 inch piece is going to be on the bottom of it. And we're just going to fold that over the top and line that up. I kind of like to have that piece on the bottom. So let me just show you again. I should have folded it over this way. So we're going to fold it over this way, this piece over there. We're going to be sewing down this side. So if you're holding it like this, we're going to be sewing down this side here, 1/4 inch. And so I'm just lining these up. So it's really important when you're cutting your fabric to get accurate cuts, because if you don't cut your fabric the right size, it's not going to, your pieces out the right size, then your blocks aren't going to come out the right size. And you also want to be watching your seams when you're sewing them, that they stay nice and straight, because if you're sewing here and then all of a sudden you start to go in an angle, your block isn't going to come out straight at all. And when you're doing this, we're skill building. So I really recommend to practice with some scraps. Make sure that you're understanding how the block goes together before you use your good fabric. And then once you know that you've got the block going, in the right, all the pieces going in the right direction, and you're understanding the block, some blocks are a lot easier. Some blocks look difficult and aren't as difficult as we think they are once we figure out how they go together. And some really are difficult. There are some advanced blocks out there that can be pretty difficult to put together. This one's mostly simple. The only thing that can be a little difficult for people is until they understand those half square triangles, they might have a little bit of a problem. Okay, so now we're going to do our seam, 1/4 of an inch. I got to switch. So if you don't have the 1/4 inch guide foot like I do, you can just use your regular foot and just follow your 1/4 inch on your plate. You could even put a piece of painter's tape or whatever on there to get to, follow to get your 1/4 inch seam. And I got my thread stuck under there. There we go. Can't be doing that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and sew this piece. Whoop, I better get in the 1/4 inch. I got to switch my machine to 1/4 inch, and I'm going to make sure that I'm on the 2.0. So if you do have the 1/4 inch guide foot, just remember you got to get your machine set for the 1/4 inch. And then, oh, excuse me, you want to make sure that you're still in the 2.0 stitch length. Okay, that's one. And we're going to do the same with the other one. We're making sure that our light triangle has its point going in this direction. We're going to put our other piece there. And we're going to fold this over, and we know that we're going to sew our seam right here on the 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to get these lined up. And I like to be a little fussy with it because I want them to line up really well. And then I'll put a clip down at this end to keep them together where I want them, so they don't shift while I'm bringing them over to my machine. I'm going to do my 1/4 of an inch stitch down that line, down that side. Okay, so now I have both done. If you did a real light fabric, you may want to have your seam going totally to the dark side. And you would want to on this piece anyways. I was thinking of it, I'm sorry, I had my mind on a different block that had more seams going different directions. This one's just totally fine. We're going to have our seam go to the dark side. Once again, we're going to just take our fingernail and run it across that seam, and we're going to roll it over, press it down. making sure that it's not rolled over this way onto our other fabric, because that changes the size of your piece if you have it overlapping. Like if this fabric was overlapping onto this fabric, it would change the size. So say it was up more like this and you ironed it, or pressed it rather, you could end up changing the size of your piece just from that alone, just from, you know, not pressing it. So you've got to make sure that it's folded out and that your seam is nice and straight, and then apply your iron for some heat. I'm just going to move that up out of the way so that I can stick my clapper on it and do my other one. And while that's setting, we'll do our next piece. Set those stitches with some heat. And then we're going to do our fingernail again against that seam. Open it up. Double check it. Then we can press it with our iron. And put the clapper on there. Now, I've really found that this clapper really is amazing. I never realized how nice it made my seams. I'm really liking it a lot. Okay, so now I've got my pieces sitting like this. So my light piece, the point is heading up in this direction. And I'm going to be adding my triangles. Clip that thread out of there. Get that out of my way. So your triangle, or rectangle rather, is going to be going on the top part. And this point of your lighter piece is going to be heading in that direction. Just fold that over so your right sides go to right side. Line your pieces up really nice so that they go together well, so you don't have like this part hanging over the other part. You want them right on top of each other. And put a clip down on this side. And remember, you can always double check by lifting it up and making sure that your point's still going up in that direction, that you didn't twist it around and get it going the wrong way, because then after you've sewed it together, you'll realize, oh, I did it wrong. And then you got to take it apart. Okay, so we're going to do our 1/4 of an inch seam straight down on this side. My thread went and got caught in the back here. There we go. I'm going to trim that thread while I'm right here. That piece is ready. So we're going to do the same thing with this one. We've got our point going up with the light fabric. We've got our rectangle up on the top. We're just going to fold that down. Actually, I should have folded it. I should have gone upwards to make it more clear to you. So this piece is going to go up like this, and we're going to do our seam down that side, which is what I should have done with the other one. Doesn't really matter as long as when I open it up, I can see that that's going up. Just want to make sure that we're getting them sewn in the right direction. And we're going to be going right down this side here. I just like to have the piece that hasn't been sewn on usually on the bottom, because our fabric does not move evenly, because it's the bottom is moving across those feed dogs, and the feed dogs is pulling, you know, sort of your fabric through, and you have your foot putting pressure down. And where we've already sewn on this one, we've already shortened it some and whatnot, and I just feel more comfortable having that other piece on the bottom, so I don't end up with them being different sizes. And I'm just getting this lined up nice. Oop. Hit my pedal by mistake. And you can double check, like I said, before you put your next clip in. Make sure that you got everything going in the right direction, and we do. I'll put that clip in the middle, hold that together, make sure everything's lined up. I like to double check my stuff. And I'll go ahead and do my 1/4 of an inch on this side. Okay, so this is the part, this is the point where I was going to explain it to you. So normally we would fold our seam toward the dark side, and our dark side is there, but we already have a lot of seams going on this side. So rather than creating bulky seams, and since this isn't a white fabric, now if it is, you could put your seam this way, and you could use your clapper to get that seam to be a little smoother and not as thick. If you don't have a clapper, might have to press it a couple of times, you know, to get it so it's not folding up on you. But since this isn't as light as my other fabric on the one that I made previously, I'm going to go in that direction with it. So I'm going to set my stitches. And then I'll just run my nails up against that seam. Make sure that's nicely folded over. And I can see that my point's going in the right direction. And I'm going to go ahead and put my iron on there, give it some heat. And then I'm going to stick my clapper on there. And I just give it a couple little pushes and let it sit and cool down. And I can work on my other piece in the meantime, so I'll set my stitches on this one. I'm sorry. Everything's starting to grow outside, and so my allergies are kicking in. Okay, so once again, I'm running my nails up against the seam, and I'm pushing that open. I'm finger pressing it. And then I'm going to apply some heat. And you're just pressing, not ironing back and forth. You don't want to distort or stretch your fabric out of shape. And I'll put my clapper on that one. We're just going to let that cool down for a second while I show you how these go together. I've already gone ahead and I've done my other two pieces. So all of our light points are going to be directional towards the center. They're going to be pointing at the center. So you'll know that you have these together the right way when you have your light points. I got a thread coming up there. Gotta clip that. Get that out of the way. So you'll know each section, your light colored fabric is pointing towards that center. And we'll get our last piece in here. Whoops, not the right way. All right, now we have them all going in the right direction. All 4 points are heading towards the center. So I'm just going to set these bottom 2 aside, leaving them together so I know which direction they're going to be going in. And I'm going to sew these 2 together. And I'm going to be sewing a 1/4 of an inch seam on this side. So I'm just going to fold this over. And I'm going to get these sitting on top of each other, nice and neat. And you can always double check. Sometimes you'll put them together and you'll be like, oh, did I twist it around? You can just open it up and see what direction they're pointing in. And then go ahead and go about getting all of your corners lined up with each other. And I'm going to put a clip here. Wait a minute. I'm just going to double check. I know it's crazy, but I like to double check everything. I was making sure that this is the way it was going. And I'm going to put a clip in the center to hold that together. I'm double checking down here. Now, if you want, you can even put a little clip down in this corner to keep it stable, and over in this corner if you want. And that just kind of keeps it all stable while you're getting it over to your machine. And we're going to do our 1/4 of an inch down this side. Okay, so now we're going to take our next 2 pieces, and we can see that both of our points are heading towards the center, so we know that they're going in the right direction. I'm just going to fold this one over, and we're going to be doing our 1/4 of an inch down that side. And once again, you can go back and double check. Did I not turn it the right way? I did. So go ahead and put those together and put your clip right up in this corner. And one in the center. And make sure that your pieces are laying nice and straight on top of each other. And you can do a clip down here just to keep it together. I know the better I have these matched up, the better my seam's going to go, and the more accurate my piece is going to be. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do our 1/4 of an inch on this side. Wait a minute, now I got to check again. Do I have that going the right way? Just checking my points. Yep. Don't be afraid to double check yourself before you sew, before you cut, before you do anything. You know, it doesn't hurt to double check. It just saves some time from having to go and rip it out. Now, if everything went well, when I open this up, my points are going to be going in the right direction. So let's check. Yay! They're pointing towards the center. Wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to press this. So once again, I don't want my seams to be overly bulky. Normally I would say, you know, it depends on the lightness of your fabric. If your fabric is kind of medium like mine, it's not going to matter if the seam's going in that direction. It's not really going to show through this fabric. If it's a white, it's going to show through more. So you would want your seam to go in that direction so that it's not showing through. And it will be a little bulkier, but it's not super bulky, so it's not really a problem. But since my fabric is kind of mediocre, not super light, I'm going to go ahead and just go with the nice flat seams for me. But like I said, if you have the white or a very, very light color that you're using for your light, go ahead and do your seam the other direction. So I'm just going to set my seam on that. Once again, I'll open it up, run my fingernail on the seam, and then I just sort of roll this out a little bit. I'm not pushing hard. I'm not stretching my fabric, and I'm pressing to make sure that my seam is nice and flat and even, not rolled over onto each other, and looks nice and straight for me. And then I'm going to press. And I'll just set my clapper on here for a couple seconds. Do a couple presses. And then we can just set this aside for a moment. And I'm going to do the same with the other one. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. We'll set our seam. We're just going to double check it, make sure it's nice and straight before we apply heat to it. And you only have to hold it a couple seconds, not a super long time. Put the clapper on it, press down, just let that cool a couple seconds. Get my iron out of the way. Okay. So I had that upside down. So now I'm making sure that my two tops are this triangles, the lighter triangles, are heading towards the center. And then I'm going to put the bottom piece in. And I'm making sure that the triangles head toward the center as well. The only seam that we need to match up today is this one center seam. That's the only one that we have to worry about today on this block, which makes it really nice and simple. So the only things that we were really super concentrated on today was making sure that our cuts were nice and even, that our seams were nice and even. We squared up our HSTs. Everything was good to go. So right here, we're just going to take the bottom. We know that everything's in the right direction. We're going to fold the top down over. We're going to put right sides to right sides. And I have my seams because I put them, you know, even if you had gone to the dark side, your seams would be going in opposite directions. So this one's going in one direction, and my other seam is going in the other direction. And that's really important at this point so that our seams can lock together. They're going to push up against each other, kind of like intersecting blocks. They're just going to push, and you can kind of feel them grab into each other. Now, some people like to do a couple little dabs with either a glue stick or a temporary glue. Both will wash out. I prefer the temporary glue when I do it. If I have a difficult seam that I'm putting together, this one's not as bad today, and I'm out of the temporary glue at the moment. I'm going to be getting some in. So you just want to, if you were to do the glue, what the glue does, the temporary glue, it just holds your pieces together. And I'm still, I still would pin it. I have not proficiently tried out the forked pins yet, and I don't want to demonstrate something until I'm feeling really comfortable with it. So you could do the 2 little dabs of glue that will help secure your seam. I'm making sure that my raw edges are matched up. I kind of wiggle it and feel that it's in place. And you'll get more used to these as you're doing them. And I'm going to take my pin, holding it straight. I'm going to push it down right where that seam is to the bottom piece. And then I look at the bottom, and it looks like it's gone through the seam properly, but I like to open it up before I push my pin through. I like to open it up, and I like to take a good look at it. Now, even though that looked like it was good from the back side, I can see that my pin is going into this side rather than into the seam where I want it. So I'm just going to ease my pin out. I can see right where my pin hole was, right there, and I'm going to go right next to it and stick my pin in. And then I'm going to wiggle this again, make sure that my edges, my raw edges are even, that my pin is straight, and then I'm going to put my pin in. And that will help give me a nice even seam that it will match up really nice at the end. Now I'm going to match up my 2 ends over here, and I'm going to clip it. You could pin it. It's all in your preference of what you like to use. I'm going to put another clip right here, and I'm making sure that my raw edges are matched up really nice and neat. And I'm going to put one more clip right here in this center. And I'm going to make sure that this is all lined up at the end. Okay. I'm going to be sewing 1/4 of an inch all the way across here. And I'm going to move the camera in just a little closer. All right. So let's go ahead and sew this. You just take your clips or your pins out as you go. Now when I'm putting a seam together like this, and I don't have the little dabs of glue there, and they're not necessary, but some people find it very helpful, so I just wanted to point that out to you. And there are times when I find the temporary glue to be a little helpful for me. I'm just going to hold my pin down and let it go underneath my guide foot, because I'm going to slowly sew until I'm almost to my pin. I don't want to get too close and hit my pin, but I want to be just a little bit, about, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or 1/8 of an inch, I can't tell for sure, away from my pin, because the closer that I can get without hitting my pin, because if you hit your pin, you might break your needle, and you don't want that to happen. So that will hold that section in for me a little better. And I'm going to hold my finger on this side and take my pin out. And I'm going to continue to hold this as I sew along and keep my 1/4 of an inch going. And I'm just making sure that my end pieces are lining up real nice. Everything's staying lined up real nice. Okay. So, our very last step. Find my iron. Lost my iron. It was right there. Okay, so now I'm going to set my stitches. I'm going to move the camera back a little bit so that you can see a little better. I'm just going to press that seam and set those stitches. And then once again, I'm going to run my fingernails up against the seam. And I'm going to open it up. Oh, getting my face a little too close to that iron is not good. Don't want to burn myself. So now I'm just being careful that my seam is going in all in the same direction. So I just kind of double check it. I can see on this side my seam's going up. On this side my seam is going up. And I can feel under the center that it's going in the right direction. I've got it nicely pushed out and finger pressed. You don't want to push hard. You don't want to stretch your fabric, but you just want to make sure that it's rolled back and you've got a nice straight line. And as you can see, my seam is lined up. It's almost perfect. It's just a hair off. Just a tiny smidget. But it's close enough for me. I'm happy with it. So I'm going to put a little heat on this side. And I'll put my clapper down on that side. And I'm going to put a little heat on this side. And put my clapper down on that side. And we have finished our scrap zigzag block. This is block 6 of our sampler blocks. We've been doing 2 blocks a month, which makes it nice because in 6 months you'll have a quilt. So I think that came out pretty nice. I'm really satisfied with it. I like it. I hope that you have enjoyed the tutorial today. I hope that you have learned some things or gotten a chance to practice something that you already knew. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. If you have found this tutorial to be helpful, please stop and like our YouTube channel. And there's a subscribe button right there. If you click on that and subscribe, and then click the bell that's right next to the subscribe button, set it to all, and then as we bring more blocks out for you, you will be able to get notified right away that they've come out. Or any other tutorial that we do, you'll get notified right away that we have a new tutorial out. Well, close to right away, because you know how the internet is. Things aren't always as right away as we would like them to be. But pretty darn close to when they get posted, you'll get notified and you'll know that there's a new tutorial up there. We have a lot more tutorials coming out. We have paper piecing coming out. I'm going to be doing a binding one separate and some other ones separate. We're going to be doing some applique, some bags, a whole bunch of fun things throughout the rest of this year. So I really hope that you have enjoyed this. This has been Seaside Quilting Tutorials. My name is Terry, and I wish you happy sewing and a great day. Thank you.